Hi everybody, welcome to yet another video. So today we're having a little look and a little play with the Ani R160 compact. Now it's actually sold as an Ani compact, but it is actually the same gun as an R160, just available in a different package, which we'll run through in a second. But I'll put a link, well actually I'll put quite a few links in the description. I'll put links in the description so that you can see the different tip sets that are available. Everything's from Sprayguns Direct. I bought the gun from Sprayguns Direct. They were kind enough to supply me free of charge with a 1.3 tip set as well. This is actually 1.4 this, and the reason for doing it in 1.4 I'll explain as we go along. I'll explain, but this is actually a 1.4, but the compact comes in a 1.3 or a 1.4, but it is fully interchangeable with the R160. So if you buy a compact in 1.3, then you can buy a tip set from the R160. Again, as I say, all the links are in the description. Buy a tip set in the R160 and convert effectively your compact to an R160. So this is quite a long video, so I should have a chance to cover quite a lot of stuff. Hopefully my voice will stay the course. I mean, my wife's can, but whether mine would be able to, I'm really not sure. So we'll give it a go anyway. So what we're doing today is I've got quite a few fairing panels to do and side panels, and normally fairing panels or side panels are quite messy to do. They're quite, well, not messy as in create a mess, awkward. Because there's different ways you have to hold the things to get a good even finish on them. So you'll notice I've left quite a bit in again, which is why the video is reasonably long. So hopefully you'll see how I do it and how I support things, and that will help people that watch the channel that are into their bike stuff and, you know, wonder how to do it. I'll also try and remember to put a link in the description. I have a little trolley you see me use quite often, which just spins round. I prefer to do each thing individually, one after the other. It just makes it easier on that trolley. If I had a big workshop or a spray booth, then I would probably do them, you know, one by one, just walking along. But I just don't have the space really. My workshop is actually quite big, but it's got loads of stuff in it. So yeah, this works for me, and I find it much easier to get good even results by keeping the sprayer's situation, i.e. where you are, the light the same, where you're facing. If you keep everything the same and you're just moving the work, to me it seems to give better results. When you're moving around something and it's hanging up, you can't always get underneath properly, you can't see it properly, whereas the way I do it here, and you see me doing it here, you get a good view of everything, and it tends to you tend to get better results. I find that anyway. So this is a pre-mixed colour. It's something somebody supplied, wanted me to do their fairing parts and that, and they supplied the colour. As far as I know, it's actually a porge red, but it's just a deep red. I have my, those that watch the channel will know that I have my own mixing kit. It was a little Capsy solvent kit, but it's quite a big one now, in that whenever I buy a new tinter, I always buy half a litre or a litre, just so that it saves me buying little bottles really. So my little kit has actually become a reasonable size kit. But yeah, I mean, it's the same anyway. It's just the quantity of paint you buy. I find it much cheaper to buy the larger quantities of paint anyway, rather than muck about with you know, 250 millilitres and the like. Anyway, you'll notice I'm heating my base coat up. I do that with base coat and I do that with clear coat, which is actually quite interesting, because I've literally just had a chap, he may even be watching this, I've literally just had a chap message me yesterday and finishing off today, who's got an Ani R160. And he was having trouble with the base coat going on quite dry. Anyway, I've given him a few things to try, and he's going to try a few different things. Hopefully, hopefully between the two of us, we'll get there. But what you'll notice is that I use a microwave to put some heat into the clear coat. And the idea of that is to help it to dry faster. Obviously, you don't want to go too mad with anything. You don't want it too hot. And it does depend on the ambient temperature. The ambient temperature, let me have a look at my paperwork, when I did this was 12 degrees Celsius. So not particularly warm. If it was warmer, then you wouldn't need to, if it was say 25 degree ambient temperature Celsius, you wouldn't need to warm the base coat up, really, because it would be around about that anyway, so it would be absolutely fine. So it's, you know, when you see me doing this, don't take it as gospel. This is what you have to do. But when you're working in 12 degrees Celsius, then you know, it's best to do these things because it does help the process along. So looking at the guns, how I actually came about getting this gun, I was on Facebook, I think it was, or Instagram. It was either Facebook or Instagram, one of the two. And Sprayguns Direct had put a post up about the compact and a few other bits and bobs relating to the compact. And I just put a message on there saying I presume this is the same body as the Ani R160. Anyway, they replied and give a reasonably detailed reply and quite an honest reply, which I appreciated, in saying that yes, it is the R160 body, but it's packaged differently. So I was thinking that I probably didn't need one because it's only a slightly bigger tip, right? So I wouldn't need one. So I actually rung them up and I got talking to them, and we were swapping a bit of information, and I thought, well, no, I do want to try one of these now. So I ended up ordering the 1.3, and as I say, they were good enough to send free of charge a 1.3 setup. So I have the 1.3 and the 1.4. I also have the 1.2 and the 1.0 as well, which is on my R160s. So that's how I got to this stage. And when I was talking to them, they were saying that the 1.4, they didn't feel that it was as I'm trying to think of the word to use. It was the 1.3 was probably the one to have, really, because it was it gives a slightly different pattern. When you look at, if you look at the link I put in the description of just doing a spray out of these two guns, it gives a slightly different pattern. It seems to be a slightly bigger pattern, but not as wet, which you would probably expect, I guess. Although when I did a test on the actual amount of material that flowed through the gun, in that same video, as I say, link in the description, they actually used the same amount of material, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Anyway, they thought that the 1.3 would be more beneficial to the 1.4. They didn't have the 1.3 at the time, which is why this video is relatively late, or these videos are relatively late. But I had the 1.4, and I thought, well, okay, I'll do something that I would normally use 1.2 on and try it at the 1.4, see how universal it is. Because the idea of this gun, as I said, it's actually sold as a compact rather than an R160, and it's designed for bigger areas. Now, it does definitely flow more material. Again, in that other video, the amount of material is probably about 20% more. It has got a bigger fan. And I have since used the 1.3, and I will put a video of the 1.3 v the 1.2. We've got a couple of test panels. I'll get those out, or should I say I have got those out, and we'll put the 1.3 up against the 1.2 and just see the difference in speed. But certainly the 1.4 and the 1.3 do put out more material than the 1.2, and you also get a bigger fan. With the compact also, you get a cup of 500 millilitres. So the whole project is designed to give you more from a minigun. And I was quite sceptical. At first I was quite sceptical. When I talked to them, I thought, no, I think I probably do need one of these. You know, I mean, do I need another spray gun? Probably not. Do I want another spray gun? Why not? So I bought one, and I must say I'm fully converted. I really do see the need to have this gun in the lineup, because it definitely is more than the 1.2 setup, which previously was the biggest tip set you can get. So if you've got an R160 but you wanted a little bit more from it, just order a tip set and a bigger cup if you wanted to, although by the time you've ordered the tip set and a bigger cup, it's only about another 40 GB pounds to get a complete set. But you know, that's up to you. How you want to go about it is up to you. But the stuff is all interchangeable. So if you have got an R160 in 1.2 or 1.0, then you can actually get these in 1.3 or 1.4, whichever you want, and it will be it's not a full-size gun. I wouldn't pretend it's a full-size gun, but it does definitely fill the brief of giving you a bit more. So you know, you would get more of the side of your car done in the same amount of time. So that led me thinking that was the reason for the video. I know it's a long-winded way around getting there, but as I said, it is a long video, so we've got plenty of time to talk about it. And if I'm boring you, I really do apologise, but I can be a bit boring sometimes. But you know, that's my nature, I guess. But what I was trying to get to was, will the bigger tips do smaller stuff? And the answer is here, and it's an emphatic yes. So it really is quite universal, the compact. I think it's quite a universal gun. Of course, anybody that watches my channel or has watched my channel before will know that I'm a bit of a, well, generally actually, I'm a bit of an ANI fan, and I've been a fan of the ANI R1, well, originally the R150 and now the R160 for, well, quite a few years. I have a few people message me every now and again about ANI, saying that their build quality is not always the best. Now, I haven't really found that, to be fair. What I like about ANI is that the build quality is pretty good. It's not the best, but it's pretty good. And what I also like is the fact that you can service and repair these things for relatively little money. Somebody messaged me the other day. I do get a lot of messages. I probably get about, well, on Instagram, probably 10 messages a day. No, that's no word of a lie. But someone messaged me the other day saying that I think that might have been on YouTube actually, but could I do a video on stripping one of these down and replacing the various seals, etc. And that is probably one of the things that happens more than on a lot of guns, is the seals on these will go. And I'm not talking about quickly, but over a period of time. But to me, that's never really been a problem. The one that will go the most is the one at the front. Where you've got your tip, that you unscrew your tip, there's a small little recess in the front of the tip, and there's a small little nylon O-ring, for want of a better word, that goes in there. And once that starts to go, you'll start to get a few bubbles through the pot. It normally doesn't affect the spraying that much until it gets bad. You used to be able to buy those as a packet of 10 for the R150. You used to be able to buy those as a packet of 10, but for the R160, as far as I know, I have looked and I've asked, and as far as I know, you can't get them. What you have to do is buy a kit. Now, the service kit for these is about 11 GB pounds. I mean, that is cheap. I've had a few problems with some of my Iwata guns. Kiwami 4 I had a problem with. LPH 80 I've had a problem with. A W 101, which is like the Kiwami 1 these days, but W101, and I've had to change a few bits in those, and for relatively small parts, just A parts, you're talking about 40 GB pounds. So to be able to get a whole service kit for 11 GB pounds or 12 GB pounds, something like that, I think is great value. So that's one of the reasons why I like the ANI guns. You may need to change the seals every now and again, but it's quite easy to do and relatively cheap. Even my SATA, I had to get some new seals. I got SATA 5000, and I had to get some new seals for those. And they came in a packet, I can't remember, they came in a packet of 3 or 5 now. But they were like nearly, well, with a bit of postage, nearly 30 quid. So, you know, it's all relative. People can say that, you know, the thing's gone wrong after 2 years, but it shouldn't be that expensive to repair these things. If you've broken it or, you know, dropped it or run it over or whatever, then that's going to be a problem. But that's going to be a problem with whatever make gun you've got. But with the ANI guns, it isn't, in my opinion, it isn't a great problem. But we will get a video together of doing one of these. It'll be a similar process for the F160 as well, but we'll get hold of a service kit. In fact, I think I've got one. I've got a service kit already. I tend to keep one just in case, and that's not particularly just for ANI. I've got a few bits that I keep for the iWatters as well, because if something goes wrong, I like to be able to repair it there and then rather than wait for the fitting, etc. So I do keep a few spare parts for things. So I may even have a kit somewhere, but we'll run through it and we'll fit it in. The only difference, the main difference with these, the body is different between the R150 and the R160, because the gun I was asked about was the R150, and there is a slight difference the way they come apart, because the onboard air adjustment, there's an external screw on the R160 which makes it easier to do, and it's actually tucked away and hidden on the R150. But otherwise they're more or less the same. Most parts aren't interchangeable, but they're more or less the same the way they're made, which is, you know, as I say, very well really. One of the things that you'll notice on the R160 over the R150 is there's like a little bit of a hunchback where the cup screws on. There's a little bit of a hunchback, and that's because they actually do make digital versions of these. So they have, I think it's called the TM1. The gauge is called the TM1. They have a digital gauge, which I have got on my ANI Skull, but they have a digital gauge that slots on. And the idea of that is you can buy one gauge and put it on individual guns, or you can just take it off. You just literally, like a little bayonet fixing, you just literally push it off, it seals, and you don't need to use the gauge. So that's why the body was actually changed, to make it so that it could take a digital gauge. And as far as I know, Sprayguns Direct don't keep any of the digital versions at the moment. Maybe that will change in the future, but certainly at the moment they don't seem to. For those interested in the process that we're doing, not just the equipment that we're actually using to do it, all these plastics have been obviously completely clean, completely sanded. They had decals on them, etc. So everything's been sanded. They were primed. So that's first with a plastic adhesion promoter. I use a U-pole one off my head. I think it's 2021, something like that. I can't remember, but I use a U-pole adhesion promoter, which has been fine. You really don't need a lot on there. It's just literally a fine coating, and then just a normal high build 2K primer over the top of that. Leave that to dry fully, and make sure you leave it to dry fully. I've had a few people message me with pictures of things saying, what do you think's happened here? And they've applied the base coat and it started to pickle. It started to have a reaction like crazy paving. And that's just going to be because the primer hasn't had enough time to cure. Very much a 2K primer, so it's a chemical reaction. It just hasn't had enough time to cure. So I always leave my stuff overnight. I know you've got the boys with the UV primer. They stick it on, a little bit of UV light, and you're good to go. I haven't got that. I don't really need that. My stuff isn't time sensitive. most of the time anyway, only when I'm doing the wife's car on the drive. But other than that, you know, I can wait. So I normally do all my priming one day, and then I'll leave it till the next day. Do bear in mind though that primer can be porous, so if it's damp conditions, you need to get a heat lamp on it for a good while before you actually start applying your base coat, so that you're not going to trap any moisture in the primer, because that can bubble up later. If you just give it to the person you're doing it for, or you go out on your bike or in your car or whatever, and you park up in a sunny spot and you come back and you've got little bubbles coming up, that's going to be because something was trapped underneath. Could be moisture, could be solvent, whatever, but that's what's going to happen. So then we'll sand it. I normally on panels like this, fairing panels and things like that, because there's lots of edges, lots of sharp edges. I normally start with a 400 grit. Now, A, it means you use more paper. B, it means it's slower, because obviously it doesn't take so much material off. But in the long run, it will actually be faster, because what you're trying not to do is to get any cut throughs on those edges, and it's very, very easy to do it. If you start with something like 240 grit, trust me, you'll be straight through those edges in no time at all. So I use something like 400 grit, even 500 grit, which is effectively my final grit. That's the grit that I'm normally putting the base coat over, because it gives it a reasonable key for the base coat to grab hold of. So 400 or 500 paper over the top. Takes a little bit longer to do it. As I say, you use more sandpaper or discs. I normally use a DA sander, and then a wet and dry on a hand sander. But just take your time over it and watch those edges, because otherwise you will go through those edges. And once you're then done, I just degrease it, normally with water, about 20% water, 80% alcohol, 100% alcohol. So no, 99.9, is it isopropyl alcohol? Can't remember what it's called now. But 80% of that, 20% of water. Just give it a good clean over, so that you're getting rid of all the residue from the sanding process. Then, as you see me do at the start of this video, I use a solvent panel wipe on the cloth. Don't apply it to the panels. Put it on the cloth and then wipe it clean, so that it's all nice and clean. Then a tack rag, so that any little bits of fibre from the cloth will be gone, and then you're good to go. And then a little bit of heat in a situation like today, when it's quite chilly, or relatively chilly for painting anyway. Just put a bit of heat on it, put a bit of heat into the base coat, and away you go. Now, this gun, you'll see me here, this gun works. For base coat, I normally use about 2.5 bar, and I wasn't sure with the compact whether it would need a bit more or a bit less, but I've been using it exactly the same as I do the R160, and I found that it works absolutely perfectly at that. So my settings for base coat are 2.5 bar. Fluid depends what you're doing. On the first few runs here, I'm doing 2.5 out on fluid. Full fluid is about 4.5 to 5, so it's nowhere near full fluid. So if the fan looks quite small, that's simply because I don't want loads of material coming out. These parts aren't particularly wide, so if you've got a big huge fan, you end up wasting half the material anyway. But when you come to the clear coat stage, which is obviously coming up later, you'll see that I open it up. I like to use my guns flat open for clear coat and just adjust distance and speed to get the results. And you will see the results at the end. And believe me, it gives a cracking finish. It left me wondering, actually thinking, well, would I ever need the 1.3? But since I've been sent it for nothing, then yeah, maybe I do. But I was expecting, after talking to Sprayguns Direct, I was expecting to be a little bit disappointed at 1.4, thinking it was all about the 1.3. But I'm not disappointed at all with the 1.4. I think the 1.4 is perfectly usable, and in my opinion as good as the 1.3. It just goes about it slightly differently. It just goes, the pattern's slightly smaller and wetter, I find. But yeah, for me it was absolutely fine, and as I say, using the same settings that I would on the R160 worked perfectly for me. So I would recommend those settings. So 2.5 bar, which is about 36 psi for base coat. The base coat adjusted how you want, how you want it. 2 turns out, 3 turns out, depending what size of area you're doing and your surface preparation. If you're going over, if you're doing like a repair, so some of its existing paintwork, don't put it on too heavy, because you will get a reaction on the edges where you've feathered in the edges with your sander. You will get a reaction if you put too much material on, too much base coat on, where your primer meets your existing material. You can end up getting an edge coming up, and that's simply because you put it on too wet, and it's staying wet for too long. Another reason why it's good to heat your base coat up, because it means that it doesn't stay wet for so long after it's been applied. So for clear coat, which we're doing now, I would use normally 3.5 bar. Normally full fluid. I like to, get the clear coming out. We don't want to muck about, we just want to get on with it. So that's exactly the settings I used here. Full fan, full fluid, 3.5 bar, and it rewards you with excellent results, as you'll see at the end. If you're still there, you'll see at the end how good this stuff came out. The downside of that is when you use these things at 3.5 bar, they're probably using about 7 CFM, I would think, maybe slightly more, which isn't loads compared to most full-size guns. It isn't loads, and compared to like the Segola Mini Extreme, it's not much different to that, to be fair. But it is more than the 4.5 CFM, I think, that the manufacturer claimed for it. So just bear that in mind. These can use lower air consumption, but I don't think you get as good results. I really think that they really do like pressure in this, which is ironic, because the F160, I think ANI, which is the full-size version of this effectively, but ANI recommend, I think it's 2.2 bar, so about 34 psi, something like that. And I find it works perfectly happy at 29 psi, so 2 bar. But this one, definitely, in my opinion, needs more pressure. But you'll see at the end, it's capable of terrific results. And you'll see the size of the fan there. You'll see the size of the fan there. It is capable of doing much more than I'm doing here. But I like to do it to the opposite extreme, if that makes sense. You take something that's capable of doing, a bigger area, and try it on smaller parts, because it's going to do the bigger stuff. But what's it like for smaller parts? And that gives people an idea of what to buy, doesn't it? In that, they're not all mad like me, and they all haven't got the finances that I've got to be able to, do this and play the game that I do with these. But certainly, if you're mainly after doing bigger areas, but you want something to do smaller stuff as well, certainly the 1.3 or the 1.4 I think would be absolutely fine. You may well need to skip the 1.0 or the 1.2, because it is capable of doing better things. One of the things you'll notice with the ANI actually is the fan tends to be a little bit on or off. Now it doesn't mean it's not adjustable, but it means that it's not very linear, if that makes sense. From being spot to fully open isn't like a huge distance. You do get there, but just bear in mind, there's not if you give it half a turn, you go from like spot to full fan. although it's got loads of turns after that, but it doesn't seem to make much difference. Not a fault really, just an observation more than anything else. Another thing I will say while I'm on the subject of fan adjustment, I have said it in the original video, but I will say it again, because I've had probably over the last 2.5 years, probably about 8 people contact me saying they've got a problem with their fan adjuster because the knob turns and it gets to a certain stage and then it just keeps turning and nothing happens. That's not a fault, that's just what it does. They all seem to do that. People have said to me, you know, I've returned one gun. I got it from Sprayguns, so I've returned one gun to Sprayguns Direct. They've sent me out another one, and that one's doing the same. Is your one doing it? And the answer to that is yes. And I've had about 3 people say exactly the same thing. Is my one doing it? Because they've just got a replacement, and that's still doing it. That's just what they do. A couple of the eye watchers do a similar thing. It's just what they do. It's not a problem. As long as the fan adjustment works, which they normally do, it really isn't a problem. So there's nothing to worry about. The clear coat for this video was only a cheap clear coat. It was the U-Pole 2080 with extra fast hardener because it was a bit chilly. The extra fast does have a little bit of dieback. We're coming towards the end of the video, so the stuff you see outside in a minute, which is the some of the panels you'll see, finished panels, was a day later, so any initial dieback would have gone. But you can see how good of a flat finish you can get with this gun. It's really relatively straightforward to use. As long as you get your preparation done, the gun's capable of some very, very good results. All the stuff you see, obviously this is right afterwards, but all the stuff you see in a minute outside is all off the gun. Nothing's been touched at all. Nothing's been polished, sanded, nothing's done to it at all. I leave everything completely in the state that it was sprayed in, so that it gives you guys an idea of what to expect straight from the spray gun. You'll see there's a couple of small nibs in it. Inevitable you'll get that, especially in my situation where I haven't got sort of like super clean facilities, although I don't do too bad, to be fair. Also, with all these fairing panels and things like that, make sure you're getting all the edges and the sides, because you can do a really nice job and you'll turn it to a certain way and you'll realise that you've missed a bit, which is no good at all. So this is the final stuff, final finish. As I say, this is all off the gun. Nothing's been touched at all. So you should be capable of getting just as good a finish with your gun as obviously I can. Yes, I've got a bit more experience and a bit more practice, but the gun is certainly capable of doing really, really well. And this is the 1.4, the one that I was advised probably wasn't the best for things like this, but it coped admirably. As you can see, it done an excellent job. So there you have it, guys. As I say, long video, sorry about that, but I do rub it on a bit. The ANI stays up there as one of my favourite guns, as it always has been, and this really does give you a bit more strings to the bow, as they say. It just enables it to do a bit more than it used to. Anyway, guys, thanks as always for watching. Cheers, bye bye.